Here's the problem with the original DJI Air Unit. As good as it is, it's pretty freaking heavy. When you put it on a 5-inch quadcopter, you can usually deal with the weight, especially if you leave your GoPro off and you use the DJI's high-definition recording instead of a GoPro. But when you put it on a little quadcopter like this guy, this is the Transtech Beetle. It's 2.5-inch props, and honestly, it flies pretty good. But it'd fly a whole lot better if it didn't have 50 freaking grams of Air Unit weighing it down. And that's why today's product is so exciting, because this is the Caddx Vista. And it is a DJI-compatible video transmitter, and it promises to deliver almost all the functionality of the original Air Unit. Same range, same output power, smaller form factor, lighter weight, lower cost. Has Caddx done something that even DJI couldn't do? And why is Caddx making a DJI-compatible video transmitter anyway? How did that even happen? And most importantly, how does a freaking quadcopter fly when it actually has this thing in it? Those are all questions we're going to tackle today. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. I want to start this video by going into the similarities and the differences between the Caddx Vista and the original DJI Air Unit. If you're on the fence of whether DJI is even right for you, or you have questions about the range or performance of the DJI system, there is a link in the video description to my whole DJI playlist. I've covered a lot of those topics already, and we're not going to go into them in this video. We're going to focus on the Vista itself and what it is bringing to the table. And the first thing I want to point out is that the Vista has the same performance as the original Air Unit in a lot of ways. So they're both advertised as having the same 4 kilometers of range, which really surprised me when I saw that, because surely the Vista is smaller, so it must have lower output power, and it only has 1 antenna, whereas the Air Unit has 2 antennas, and just from an RF perspective, 2 antennas should give you longer range. But I pressed the DJI engineers about this, and they were firm that the Caddx Vista has the same range as the original Air Unit. And in fact, if you're willing to do the 1200 milliwatt mod, that does work on the Vista, and it will have the same output power as the original Air Unit too. But then you can't just go from 2 antennas down to 1 antenna and not get some reduction in performance. Otherwise, we would all just have 1 antenna, and why would you waste your time with 2 antennas? And according to the engineers I talked to, the difference in performance will show up in environments where you have a lot of multipath. So the Air Unit will do better in high multipath environments. You will maintain higher picture quality, higher bitrate, lower latency, whatever it is, in high multipath environments with the original Air Unit. The Caddx Vista, in a low multipath environment, its single antenna will perform just as well. So if you're pushing long range, that's kind of a low multipath environment, and you may not notice any reduction in performance. If you're outdoors flying among the trees, low multipath environment, you may not notice any reduction in performance. But if you're flying indoors, in bandos, in car parks, in stadiums, those are high multipath environments, and that's where you may notice some reduction in performance. However, you also may not be pushing the same amount of range, and so the raw signal strength may carry you through, and that's all really good news. Now, if we compare these guys side by side, you're going to notice one major difference, and that is that the Vista does not have an SD card slot. So the Vista does not have onboard SD card recording. You'll still be able to record the high definition video in your goggles, and I gotta say, most of the time that's at least good enough to show your mom what an awesome trick you performed, if not necessarily to post on YouTube like Johnny FPV. Many people who are flying the original Air Unit still run GoPros because they want that higher quality, and they just don't feel that what the Air Unit delivers is good enough. If you are already carrying a GoPro anyway, then you're not losing anything by going to the Vista and losing that onboard DVR. One thing that I do wonder about, for those of you who are in non-FCC regions and you've done a little hack where you put a certain file on the SD card to convert your Air Unit over to FCC so you can use higher output powers, I believe that what I've heard, I live in the FCC region, so I haven't done this, but what I heard is that you put the card in the Air Unit in order to modify it and unlock it to the FCC region. I guess that won't work on this one, but there is another way to do that, which involves the use of a VPN to trick the software into thinking you're in the US, and presumably that would still work. Although I would never advise you to do that because that would be illegal and it would be inappropriate of me to advise you to do illegal things. Although the Vista has the same advertised range and output power as the larger Air unit, its smaller size does have some effect. It is much more susceptible to heat buildup, and if you've ever used your Air unit just sitting on the bench with it outputting 700 or 1200 milliwatts, you know it literally gets hot enough to burn you if you touch it. I'm not exaggerating. This guy has an even bigger problem. Because it's so much smaller, it has more trouble dissipating the heat. And if it gets too hot, hopefully it'll just shut itself down and not damage itself. But this is a very real concern. In the release notes from Caddx about updating the firmware, they say don't come in from flying and then just plug it in on the bench and update the firmware because it'll already be too hot from flying and it'll overheat in the time it takes the firmware update to finish. You want to have it cold, or maybe even a fan blowing on it while you're doing a firmware update. You're also presumably not going to want to just plug it in, set it down, and leave it sitting in the hot sun, cooking itself for a while. You're going to want to plug it in and go fly. You can't get something for nothing, and this smaller size has that trade-off. And this is especially true if you're using the 1200 milliwatt mod. Of course, you can set it to reduced output power, and the DJI firmware has the ability to lower the output power to 25 milliwatts when you disarm, and then raise it back up again when you arm. That's usually an option that I have turned off, because if I crash out in a field far, far away and disarm, I don't want it to go to 25 milliwatts and suddenly I lose my video. But maybe for this guy, that's something you could consider. Another side effect of the smaller size is that there isn't a plug. You have to solder the wires onto the side of this board, and it's some fiddly soldering. The plug-and-play nature of the original Air unit has really spoiled me for certain builds, because with the right flight controller, you plug in the ESC, you plug in the Air unit, and you solder up the motors, and then your build is just done. And that's kind of nice. So having to solder this up is a little bit annoying. It might be nice if Caddx had shipped it pre-soldered, but I guess, you know, it is cheaper. It is cheaper. Did I mention that? This guy is $150 compared to, I've seen the original Air unit as much as almost $200, maybe as little as $180, $170. So this guy's at least $20 or $30 cheaper. So that's nice. We can see from the mounting holes here that the Vista is sized for 20 millimeter standoffs, although there are also 16 millimeter mounting holes. It's hard to imagine what 16 millimeter quad would be able to carry this, but I guess it's possible. We could see toothpicks with Vistas in them. What a concept. My mind is kind of boggling right now. And that is really all we have to say about the Caddx Vista compared to the original Air unit, because in literally every other way, I hope I haven't missed any, in literally every other way, these two guys are the same. They run the same, like, firmware. I mean, not literally the same firmware because the hardware is different, but like the capabilities are the same. When you look in the goggles, you don't know whether you're using an Air unit or a Vista. Everything, focus mode, low latency mode, high latency, high quality mode, it's all the same. And in fact, the Vista even has a receiver in it for the DJI controller, if that's something you want to use. It's all the same. It's just smaller, lighter, cheaper, doesn't have a DVR, has a single antenna, and that's pretty much it. So let's stick this guy in a quadcopter and let's go fly it and let's see how it does. The next thing we got to do is install the Vista on our quadcopter. And in order to do that, I've got the pinout of the flight controller from the Beta 95X here. And we're going to take the pinout of the Vista and we'll just figure out where everything needs to go. V is going to go to ESC Plus or VBAT. On this flight controller, there doesn't appear to be, well, there's a VBAT pin coming from the ESC, but there doesn't seem to be a convenient pad to solder VBAT to, so I'll probably just solder that to the plug, to the XT30 plug. Also going to go straight to ESC minus or ground, no problem there. On this flight controller, UART3 is designed for use with S-Bus, so we're going to use UART1 for RX and TX, and TX goes to RX, and RX goes to TX. You always flip them back and forth. That's just how it's done. And then we've got S-Bus, which can go to RX3 which is on this flight controller. That's the one that has the inverter that will work with S-Bus. And then ground, we could take signal ground to this ground wire here. So I think the easiest way to do the soldering is to solder from the back side. As always, I'll start with a tin. Alright, now I've installed the wires on the Vista. Now we're going to go ahead and solder them to the flight controller and the ESC. And the receiver is easy, because it's just going to plug right back in here. On this particular flight controller anyway, that's the way it's going to go. There we go. White is RX, goes to TX on the flight controller. This is, oh my goodness, this is so fiddly. Oh, got it. Wow, that's a terrible solder joint. And goes to RX. Okay. You can also do those by sticking the wires through instead of laying them flat. I never do it that way, and I don't really know why. I mean, I have a reason, but I'm not saying it's a good reason. Fortunately, the MSP connection is not flight critical, so if that is a little bit of a janky solder joint, it just means I'll lose my OSD information. It's not the end of the world, but it'll probably be fine. This is flight critical. Just double check here. Plus to red, black to minus, black to ground, red to voltage. I think we're good. Before I go over to the computer and update the firmware, we got to install an antenna on this guy. I know DJI Air Units are usually pretty resilient. I've seen them get flown with an antenna that like popped off or got broken, and they don't seem to take permanent damage most of the time. But let's not take any chances. I'm going to go ahead and install an antenna. Actually, I'm going to install this UFL pigtail because I don't have any left-handed UFL antennas, and the antennas on the goggles are left-hand polarized, so we'll just have to figure something out. And it gets installed right here, and there's this little metal tab, but it's a little hard to see how to, like, I think you just got to loosen this screw and move this tab out of the way. They did say don't disassemble it. It has like thermal stuff inside it, and if you disassemble it, you'll mess it up. But I'm going to just loosen this one screw, and I think it'll be okay. Loosen. Now does this go out of the way? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. And we will. Oh, yeah. Okay. And it's got a little tab here that it locks into. You just push this down. That's not going anywhere. Moment of truth. We will plug in the battery and see if anything goes poof. No poof yet. And then we will plug in USB. All this time, it's heating up. It's overheating even now as we speak. Must go faster. I feel like Indiana Jones. There we go. Oh, what the hell? Oh, so I'm going to guess my DJI Assistant needs to be updated. So I'm going to unplug my battery here. Version 2.0.0. I need to update it? Here we go. DJI FPV series. And sure enough, version 2.02. That must be the issue. Yeah, release notes. I bet it says added Caddx Vista. Alright. Okay, now we are on the latest version. Let's try that one more time. Oh, there we go. DJI FPV Air Unit Lite. And we must do a firmware update. The versions that are shipping now. You should always, that's just the first thing you should always do whenever you have a new DJI device. Okay. And power down. Powered out. Okay, power down. Well, just one last thing to do before we get in the air, and that's to finish the setup of the flight controller. For those of you who are following along at home, we've got Serial RX on UART 3. That's correct. UART 1, we're going to enable MSP to let it talk to the goggles, talk to the air unit. And UART 6, we do not need smart audio because we don't have a video transmitter. Yeah, we're also going to need to bind to the transmitter. We'll Okay, we got that. And our channel mapping is whacked out. Throttle, good. Yaw, good. Pitch, good. Endpoints are not perfect, but close enough. That's fine. Receiver's working. And I can see in the goggles that VBAT is working, so we're all good. All right, guys. This is always so hard. Low power mode. There you go. So it's already overheating. It's already gone into low power mode. Okay, that's obnoxious. Why would the goggle refuse to record when the air unit is in low power mode? Is that for real? Okay. So we're recording again. I just turned auto temp control off. It was going into low power mode. I don't know why the goggles would refuse to record DVR when the freaking air unit's in low power mode. That doesn't make any freaking sense to me, but there you go. I mean, does this mean it's going to overheat and damage itself because temp control is off? I have no idea. It's freaking literally 0 degrees Celsius here. It's literally freezing right now. So I can't imagine it's going to overheat. I'm going to put it back to the 700 milliwatts it shipped with, and we're going to see how it goes. We are recording. Let's get this sucker up in the air and see what happens. Okay, so how's our coverage? 27 milliseconds down here. This is the edge of my property. We're still at 25 megabits per second and 27 millisecond. So that's good. 700 milliwatts output power. Factory antennas. The luminaire axis is what's on the quad. Here we go through here. This is where we would see the most breakup in my experience. 28 milliseconds, 25. It's holding its own just fine. Really just staying at the lowest latency. 25 to 35 milliseconds of latency everywhere on the property. This is with standard 700 milliwatts output power. We haven't even gone up to 1200 milliwatts. Let's do a little bit of a range check. And to do the range check, what I will typically do is fly down the road here. This is not the most scientific, but it will give us some perspective. 22 milliseconds, 27 milliseconds, 26, 24, 30 milliseconds. We're doing great. We're at 15-ish megabits per second now. Still just doing great with the latency. The picture is starting to get kind of crappy now. 2 bars of RSSI, 7 megabits per second. I know as I come through here, it's hanging in. The latency is staying super low. I think they've improved this since the last time I did this test, because last time I did this test, I definitely got some increase in latency as I came through that area. This is about the worst, especially as I'm down near the ground. But it is, if I just gain the tiniest bit of altitude, it pops back up and gets good again. 30 milliseconds of latency, 3 bars. I can keep going. This is insane. Now we're down to about 2 bars of video. Still 46 milliseconds. Now it's starting to get iffy. So I could definitely, 1 bar of video, I could definitely keep flying this, but it's getting iffy. I can't believe how far I've gotten. This is further than I even went on the Air Unit when I did the test. They must have improved the firmware somewhat. I was not able to go this far. Look how far I am. I'm going to fly back. Look how far I got. This is crazy. I mean, I know if you're a long-range person, then this is not that far, you know, but, like, this is definitely as far as I would typically go on, like, an 800 milliwatt VTX. This is pretty impressive. I'm going to crank it up to 1200 milliwatts, and, oh, there we go. Oh, we're upside down. I'm going to crank it up to 1200 milliwatts and just do a little informal comparison. And I am going to fly along the road again, because flying down low near the road does have an effect. There are more trees and obstructions. I'm glad I'm flying the BetaFPV, just in case I run pass a person walking on the road or something. It's a little less threatening than an open prop 5-inch. The latency's good, the bit rate is good, 3 bars and holding. Now I'm starting to see some image breakup. Little bit of breakup, but still fine. Now it's getting just a little sketchy. We're at 2 bars, still flyable, but not the best. We'll come through here, coming back. This is the point where if I gain just a little altitude, it'll pop right back in. Doing great. Now it's bad. I saw a stutter there. I felt just the tiniest stutter there, just the littlest bit. Now we're at 3 bars again though, and I can definitely keep pushing. Oh, it's bad. It's bad. Video is bad. 1 bar. I'm climbing out. Get it back. Get it back. We're also at 13.9 volts, which isn't good. Okay, so I feel like we went a little further, but not like shockingly further on 1200. That's interesting. I think that's more a limitation of the sort of experimental design. 1200 should give much more penetration. 13.8 volts. I don't want to lose my battery and crash, so I'm going to fly over the road here. It's cold. Like I said, it's literally freezing out here right now, so if the battery tanks out, I don't want to drop it on my neighbor's property. This is interesting. Interesting. So what's the final word on the Caddx Vista? I would say that this is 1000% a viable alternative to the Air Unit for those quads where the Air Unit is simply not an option. Like this Beta 95X, you're not going to find anything this size and weight that can carry an Air Unit. It's just not possible. But as much as the Vista comes close to the performance of the Air Unit in terms of output power, range, and so forth, the limitations are real. And the biggest limitation seems to be that when I turn on the temperature protection, basically it goes into temperature protection immediately. Even if it's at 25 milliwatts, it just goes like, never mind. And the frame rate gets all stuttery and things get weird. And if I turn the temperature protection off, then it's fine, it's perfect. And it doesn't seem to overheat, but if it did overheat, then would it damage itself? I don't know. This is kind of weird. I haven't seen any other reviewers report this, so maybe it's just me, but I can only report on the experiences that I'm having. But all that being said, I'm really impressed with what DJI or Caddx has done with the Caddx Vista. And by the way, let's take a second and address that. Caddx made this. Can you trust Caddx's build quality? Like, Caddx makes good quality budget stuff, but it's not at the highest level of quality that you would expect from a vendor like DJI. The truth is, Caddx didn't invent this. Caddx is building it, but they are building it with the permission and the oversight of DJI. So I think that you probably can expect DJI levels of quality from this. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. There you go. Caddx Vista. If you can go with the Air Unit, I think you should. Onboard recording, better heat dissipation. But if you absolutely need something lightweight and you still want to get DJI performance, the Vista is an option. There are links to the Vista and the DJI Air Unit and my whole DJI playlist down in the video description. Check all that stuff out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy flying.